Welcome to Deep Dives with Will and Reubs.
The show making accounting cool again.
I'm Will.
And I'm Ruben.
And in today's episode, we are doing an industry deep dive.
That's where we pull an industry out of the hat from the 30 to 50 industries we have written down on little bits of paper, and we're going to talk about what is that industry, the challenges faced by that industry, how that industry makes money, so that as an accountant or a business advisor, if you're meeting somebody in that industry, you're going to be equipped to ask really good questions.
Exactly, but before we do that,
we're going to get into our quote of the week.
Great, so our quote of the week this week is from Elon Musk, and the quote is, "The first step is to establish whether something is possible, then probability will occur."
Fantastic. And how does that? What does that mean to you?
So, I think what I've learned over the years I've been in business, and also I suppose what many other people have that have achieved great things have done, is we've realised that there is a solution to every problem. So if there's a problem, first you need to establish whether there is a solution is possible. And we're talking about right down to like an atomic level. Does the physical, and within physical reality, is it possible to solve this problem? And if the answer is yes, then you're going to start that journey on solving that problem, and then probability will occur. So I've often said that there's a solution to every problem. It just depends on how much time and effort you're willing to throw at it.
That's right. Elon's a great example of that. Like, he looked at the wastefulness of the rocket industry. He's been in many industries, but to take one of the more recent ones, looked at the wastefulness of the fact we're firing these enormous rockets into space and just letting them float around afterward. And he said, why can't we land those things?
That's right.
He kept asking that same question. Why can't we retrieve that rocket and reuse it? And he kept asking the same question over and over again until eventually he manages to do it.
Land a rocket, yeah. And I mean, I think that everyone else would say you can't re-land a rocket because it's very, 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 very hard to do so.
Yep.
But that's not impossible.
That's right.
So it just comes down to that perseverance and sticking at it. And as long as you have the goal in mind and it is possible, you'll get there.
Probability will occur.
Probability will occur. And again, flicking back to a quote we had a previous week, opportunity often comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. As you work towards that probability outcoming, the amount of misfortune and temporary defeat you're going to face along the way is going to be huge, depending obviously on how difficult that problem is that you're trying to solve.
Totally.
But it's a really, really cool quote that's the first step is to establish whether something is possible, then probability will occur.
That's really enheartening. Yeah. All right, so we crack into our industry of the week.
Yeah, man.
This is pulled straight out of a hat. We don't pre-organise this. Actually, one just fell out. So I'll put that back in. Shuffle those up. Are you going to draw it this time?
Yeah, right. I'll dive on in there.
Pull a good one out.
Pull a good one.
They're all good ones.
They're all good ones. So I always say when we're playing softball and someone's up to bat, a friend of mine, Chris, he'll go, "Who's up to bat? Is it someone good?" There's always someone good. So what have we got? We've got advertising.
All right. Yeah.
Right on.
We've dealt with a few advertising agencies over the years.
Yeah. Very different, actually. You'd think that advertising would be like a general consulting, but they've actually got a lot of idiosyncrasies. Is that a word?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and that's the word I would use. They have a lot of idiosyncrasies to their industry.
Yeah.
That if you weren't aware of, you wouldn't be able to ask really good questions.
That's right. And now that we've pulled this one out, I'm getting a little bit like I'm racing through my mind to remember everything they do because it is quite complicated.
Yeah, they do a lot of different things.
I think a big thing is they have a lot of subcontractors in the advertising agencies. That's where it is different to a lot of other professional services, is they're not only managing internal time, there's a lot of subcontractors that are involved.
Like, for example, anything print, media, digital advertising. If you're doing experiential stuff, you've got to hire the people that are delivering the hors d'oeuvres, if it's an event, for example.
That's right. Before we do that, how do they make money?
How do
advertising agencies make money?
We're familiar with what advertising is and the industry itself, but how do they make money? They make money by quoting a campaign. So somebody in a business, let's say, I'm a brand. I go to an advertising agency and I say, I have this campaign in mind. I want to sell this product to these people. And the agency needs to brief that somehow. Normally, they'll do that for free. Okay, so most of the ones I deal with, they have to write a brief. And that's the biggest cost in advertising, is they spend ages writing the brief. And that's at no cost. It's one of the few industries where you pour like weeks worth of effort into a quote.
You're pitching for work.
Exactly, you're pitching for work, and you put so much effort into those pitches that is pretty much not recoverable. You have to recover that when you win the work. That's just one of the complexities. And you can't half do them either. You need to be the pitch needs to be really, really, of a high standard, so that when you do win that work, you can start delivering it. So how do they make money? When they do win that campaign, they're going to price the campaign at $200,000, and it's going to be phase 1, this part, concept, phase 2, the media creation perhaps, and then phase 3, the delivery or the rollout, for example. And so they make money by delivering that campaign in its entirety and as one fixed value, and delivering it in with a time value lower than that. They don't typically charge hourly for things in advertising. Like a lot of professional services, you don't go and hire an advertising agency and go, I'm going to use you for an hour, and you for an hour, and you for an hour, and I'm going to get 3 bills. They charge one fee for the whole campaign. It's a big dollar value normally, and the agency is just up for delivering it.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just, for some reason, Rolls-Royce popped into mind. Imagine Rolls-Royce wants to run a campaign, and then they'll go approach a large advertising agency. I'm pulling up big names here, Saatchi and Saatchi, just to pick some big names. So Rolls-Royce goes, right, we have we've developed the new Rolls-Royce. Oh man, why don't you use Rolls-Royce? I don't have a lot of Rolls-Royce vehicles.
Vehicles, right?
Yeah. But I'm like, what's it? Rolls-Royce Ghost or something? Is that a car? I don't know. Let's call it. They've got the Rolls-Royce Ghost.
Right, and we want to sell it to people in Australia over the age of 60 with an income greater than $120,000.
That's right. And then the advertising agency were like, right, well, we think we first need to look at placement. So we're going to place these ads. Well, we know that people that travel in first class on airplanes have a lot of money, so we're going to put ads in those magazines.
The brochure.
Mm-hmm. We're also going to put a billboard up down on this main street of Sydney.
Outside the dentist, because we know people often get dental work, and people who can afford high-end dentists.
That's right. So what they'll be doing, they'll be thinking about, right, well, we've got a budget. So Rolls-Royce goes, right, well, I've got a $5 million budget to get this car to market. And then what they'll do is they go to an advertising agency like Saatchi and Saatchi, and then what they would do is they'd go put a pitch together or a brief that says, right, we're going to spend that $5 million like this.
Exactly.
And then what they would do is they're going to have 2 parts to that. One is going to be internal labour, so they'll have their own team of, let's say, 10 or 15 people, creatives and designers. And then what they'd have companies that they work with. So they'd have a print company. So they'd go, right, well, out of the $5 million budget, $300,000 of that is going to be sent to this print company to do all of the printing. $200,000 is going to the social media company who's going to run a social media campaign. Another $500,000 is going to a different social media company because they do LinkedIn better. So they're going to go and contract a lot of that work out. And then obviously they're going to leave a margin in there for themselves as well. So they're going to make margin in 2 ways. One is on the billable labour. So they're going to have staff that they charge out at, let's say, $250 an hour. But they're not going to be paying their staff $250 an hour. They're going to be making margin on their time. They're also going to be making margin on the actual project itself.
Great, yeah.
So that's how they make money. It's going to be from selling time and also project and making markups on the overall project, and also the markups on their subcontractors.
Yeah, fantastic. So what kind of challenges do people in advertising typically face?
There's a lot. There's actually a lot.
It's a complex industry, a lot more complex than most professional services.
It's competitive.
Yeah.
And also the actual the planning and the scheduling. There's a lot of logistics involved. So when you're running a campaign and you've got, let's say there's 10 subcontractors and you've got 15 internal staff that are working on a campaign, there's a lot of communication going back and forth. So that's a big challenge that they have, is actually what's getting delivered on what date, because you need to make sure that the branding is done before the print goes to
Absolutely.
print, and then the print needs to go out before the social media campaign. So there's a lot of logistics that are involved, and my understanding is that is quite challenging for them. Is imagine you've got that, but you've also got 30 other brands you're working for, and how do you manage all of that? It's a lot of work.
And keep the customer happy, because the thing about advertising that's quite tough is it's difficult to show return. You can't say somebody saw this ad and bought that car. That's very unlike an accountant or a lawyer or an engineer or an architect that can say, here's your drawings. And advertising agencies can say, here's your campaign, but it's very difficult to show the effectiveness of that campaign.
So it's a lot of it's down to relationships, and they call them suits.
Yes.
So if you hear the term suits, those are the people that are building the relationships with the customers and taking the briefs, and then then looking at putting the team in place to contract that work out.
Another challenge I alluded to earlier was around the time invested in those briefs. So those briefs, that making the pitch is so critical, they put so much effort into it, but not many advertising agencies really have much visibility around how much effort goes into those, because they don't know. You may have put, I don't know, if we were to equate it in dollar value, you may have put $3,000 worth of time, or your staff may have, into preparing a pitch for a $40,000 campaign. However, you may not make that $3,000 back on that campaign. In fact, if you delivered that campaign at $40,000 worth of time internally, for example, then you've actually lost money, because you did that pitch for free. So a lot of people don't have visibility when they're looking at that job margin. They only start the job when the pitch is won. Where in advertising, the job really starts when the brief starts, even though the customer's not paying you for it. So a lot of people don't track or have much visibility around the effort that goes into those briefs.
Now with that, so I suppose there's two schools of thought on how we actually set I'm getting into a little bit of detail. Hey, but it's deep dives, isn't it?
This is a deep dive, so dive deep, brother.
All right, man.
I'm going to put my scuba gear on. Hold on.
So what we're doing is we're spending a couple of weeks preparing a brief.
Yeah.
Right. And then what we could do is we could either look at putting that into a giant bucket of brief time, or we could take the cost of preparing that brief and we can capitalize that into part of the job.
Totally.
So what are your thoughts? Do you think we should just have like a giant bucket of where we put all of our time to briefs, and we go, right, well, this year we've spent X amount on briefs, or should we be setting up a project, putting the time in there as brief, and once the brief is then accepted, we then move that time cost over to the project, so we can look at not capitalizing as such.
Yeah, but recognizing.
We can recognize, sorry, that's the word I was looking for, bro. We recognize the cost of that brief against the project. So once you've delivered the project, you can go, right, well, $20,000 was actually of the brief.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so on the day you start the project, once you win the work, you're actually already in the red using that method, and that's good, because then you're recognizing the time you've already invested, and you can climb out as you invoice that campaign at the end of the campaign or throughout the campaign. There's three kind of, depends on the volume of jobs in my experience. So there's three kind of methods. The one you just described, where we have a job per brief almost, and move that time into the project when it's won. Another method may be to have a briefing job per client. So some advertising agencies, they only have like a dozen clients. They only do advertising for, say, Nestle and and a bunch of big brands like that. But they do heaps of briefs for Nestle in a week, in a month. They may have like 8 on. So they just they may put them as a maybe an easy option. Put all briefing for Nestle campaigns into Nestle briefing job. Then at least we can track how much time and effort we put into Nestle briefing, and we can look at it maybe monthly or annually or quarterly and say, well, here's all the money we made from Nestle. I can see that in my P&L. Here's all the time I put into briefing to them, and maybe you didn't win so many. And you go, why do we spend so long pitching for Nestle jobs that we don't win? That's the sort of things you can start getting out if you start tracking it at that level. And the worst method is the big bucket method, where you at least, I guess it's not the worst, but it's the second to worst method, is you just chuck all your briefing into one big bucket. So you can say, here's how long we spent briefing. We don't know who it was for or who it was to, but there's a lot of it.
Yeah, totally. And I like the approach of, I like bringing through the cost into the projects. And,
so do I.
And if what I do is I'd look at having, because within a job, you can have tasks within a job, right? So you might go, right, well, we have this Rolls-Royce campaign we're running, but then we're going to have the brief would be a task, and we'd
graphic
have design would be a task.
project management, these are the sorts of activities that we see.
So there might 7 or 8 different tasks, but then what we could do is then we could run a cost analysis or a number of hours on that task briefing, and then we could look at briefing by client, and then we could see that. So what we're doing is from a job perspective, we can see the total cost on the job, but then we could do an analysis on that task over a financial year, and then we could see how much time we're spending on briefing, and then we could look at conversion rates and things. So these are the sort of things that you'd want to be tracking in an advertising agency.
Absolutely. But like everything that gets measured, it does come at a cost. So there is an administrative cost in measuring time, obviously, but I think the benefit is so essential, especially for this industry where it is so easy just to sink time into an endless bucket of briefing and an endless bucket of delivery and never know if you make enough money or not, or where you make money or what campaigns or what customers are profitable. A lot of advertising agencies don't have a clue which of their customers are profitable. They know the revenue by customer pretty well, but they don't know the costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Timesheets are really important, but we're going to save that for another chat on another day.
Yeah. To wrap up advertising, what kind of technologies advertising agencies use to connect to their accounting systems?
Well, that's a really tough one. That's a really tough one because there is Xero for accounting, great solution.
Yep.
And then for the actual timesheets and project costing, Workflow Max is really good. But the downside of Workflow Max is it doesn't fulfill the function of scheduling very well.
For advertising,
advertising agencies.
Scheduling is such a big focus. Like we talked about the sequentialness of a campaign. That's why we see things like I do see more and more apps like Trello.
I was about to say,
which is very collaborative. If you're not familiar with it, it's more of a Kanban style. Moving tasks through a sequence of events, and everyone collaborating and putting notes and images and documents against those tasks and completing them as they go.
Yeah, and I've never looked at it, but I've seen probably around 2,000 or 3,000 YouTube ads for Monday.com.
Yes, yep.
Yep, so Monday.com I hear is good,
I wonder who does their advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah, there could be a good contra happening there.
That's right. So, yeah.
These are the sorts of tools that an agency would really benefit from, so around job management, project management, scheduling definitely, and around that collaboration tool in between staff, because there's so much happening on a campaign.
Yeah. And there's actually a lot of disbursements that happen in the advertising agencies as well. So there's a lot of coffees, a lot of hotels, a lot of planes, a lot of flights, because it's very relationship heavy. And generally, if you're hiring an advertising agency, you've got reasonably deep pockets.
Yep.
You can afford to fly the suit in for a lunch to talk about something.
Yep.
Whereas if you're a 3-staff plumbing company, you're probably not going to hire an advertising agency.
No, you're going to do your own.
You'll do your own.
Use it one-off.
That's right. You'll probably get a few ideas off YouTube. You might sign up to a course online of how to do some advertising.
Totally.
But yeah, so that's where disbursements are a big part of that, and how we track our disbursements. There's apps like Xero Expenses. There's Receipt Bank. There's Extracted. There's a whole lot out there. The downside is that from what I've seen, I've never seen the ability to scan a receipt and it stores that against the project, and then it sends it down to Xero. That's something that I hear about all the time is, hey, why can't Receipt Bank scan a receipt and put it into Workflow Max against the project and drop it into Xero for me?
Job.
The reason I can answer that question, and it's because there's limitations around the API. Back to our quote, first establish whether something is possible, then probability will occur. Well, the problem is Workflow Max's API does not allow that, so that's why it's probably not going to happen.
Right now, not possible.
At the moment, until they develop out the API further. But that is a very, very common request I hear, not just from advertising agencies, but many other professional service organisations, that they deal with a high volume of receipts and disbursements for their staff. It'd be really nice to scan it and it shoots straight against the project. But again, that's just another challenge that we have for the advertising agencies, and it's also a challenge we have in terms of the technology.
Right. So hopefully, as an accountant or business advisor, we've given you enough different areas to look into and enough tools to ask some really, really good questions if you were to meet with one of your advertising customers.
That's it. Yeah. Awesome.
All right. So we'll wrap that up there, and we'll see you in the next episode, which will be on Metrics That Matter.
Fantastic. See you guys then.